Welcome to another CEO Wisdom Pod with Chase Friedman. With us today, he is CEO and founder at Vanquish Media Group. This podcast brought to you by podbuyer.com. If you want to start scale, be invited to Pod or find sponsors. Podcasts are a great way to grow, meet new people, have a community as a backend, generate leads, and even generate clients. So podbuyer.com if you need a podcast agency to help you with your pod. Chase, welcome to the pod. Can you tell us a bit more about yourself and about Vanquish?
Yeah, certainly. So my role is really working with and supporting brands, businesses on developing their unique identity and purpose and helping communicate that with their customers and consumers. So really, it really starts in and around brand identity and strategy, which for me is kind of in my DNA. I began my career as a storyteller, as a filmmaker in independent film and TV. So I have that sort of independent kind of creative storyteller spirit. But I really love applying that to businesses and brands, whether they are just starting out or they're well underway and feeling kind of stuck and uninspired and confused with their message and how to share that with the world.
Right. And who do you target at that company, and what specific offer do you have for them?
Yeah, I mean, I really like working with SMBs, small, medium-sized businesses, or solopreneurs, quite frankly, for that matter. Being able to you got to be really in the trenches, roll up your sleeves with the founder, with the C-suite to really work with them, quite frankly, on personal development that inspires the professional development of the brand. And so that's kind of where, my sweet spot is. Really getting people to, really asking the tough questions, quite frankly, getting people to be vulnerable with what their business is and what they want it to be, and developing that purpose. Kind of the biggest thing that I love starting with is what I consider a brand discovery, session, or package, right? And it's really getting clear with everything about your business, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and how we can put together what I like to call a brand blueprint, really a clear roadmap of your brand strategy, messaging, and next steps to either grow and scale your business or build it from scratch.
What type of hard questions do you ask in these moments?
Yeah, I mean, it starts with questions that have nothing, quite frankly, to do with the business itself. What do you believe? What do you believe in? What do you value? What's the impact and legacy you want to leave on the world, right? Where do you draw your sense of inspiration and purpose and meaning? I think there's three kind of things that people need to look at when developing kind of their unique purpose in life to guide them or for their business. Where's the passion, right? Where do you feel that sense of inspiration and meaning in the work that you do or in any aspect of your life? Who are the people that you enjoy serving and can best serve and why? And then what is the impact or legacy that you want to make and leave? Those are kind of three of the core pillars. But when it comes down to, understanding your why, it's really as simple as what do you believe and what do you stand for beyond the bottom line?
So I'm going to ask that same question to you. What do you believe in, and what are your values?
Absolutely. So what I believe in, I believe in the capacity for every person and every business to do good and do well, to profit with purpose. I believe we're living in kind of a time in a stakeholder and conscious driven sort of economy where people are willing to pay more for, work for, and invest in businesses and brands and products that align with their values. So that's kind of my belief, and my mantra. My purpose is really helping provide that clarity for others to identify and implement the purpose in their business and brand to help guide the path forward. Just as I went through the process of self-introspection for myself and guiding my work and my career, I found that that's kind of my superpower, is helping others find that for themselves and helping that guide their way.
What percentage of businesses are purpose-driven versus the non-purpose-driven ones?
It's a really good question. I don't know if I could tell you a percentage. I could tell you this, that Fortunately, unfortunately, there's probably more companies that I think are positioning themselves as purpose driven, but aren't really walking the talk, right? And this is kind of what, what I mean by what we've heard as greenwashing, right, in the environmental space, or just in general purpose washing, right? It's very easy for businesses and companies to say they're doing good in the world, say they want to do good and have a greater impact. And yet, where's the accountability? Where's the responsibility for actually acting upon it? So I'll tell you this, I think there's a growing number of businesses and a movement of people that when they are starting their new business, they want to do so to with an impetus to make a greater impact and leave a lasting legacy and do good in the world. And quite frankly, I believe that the companies that do not embrace that are very quickly going to become extinct.
How did you get there? Because you started that business in 2016. Before that, were an executive producer, you were a writer. You then became VP of Kingmaker. What's your story and what led you to found your own business?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, I think it was a lot of pivots, a lot of figuring things out along the way, taking risks, walking away from relatively safe jobs, employee jobs and positions that just didn't really feel aligned. I didn't feel inspired by. So I think for me, it was more out of necessity. I knew that, I wasn't finding the role or the type of work that would fulfill me in a traditional sort of job or corporation. I felt it to be a little bit limiting and suffocating. And so it was a little bit out of necessity, an accidental entrepreneur of, okay, well, then I need to build something for myself. And really being able to, the same way I kind of started in filmmaking. I didn't go to film school, but I loved it and I worked at it and I practiced it. And it was kind of school, the hard knocks of how I learned how to become a filmmaker and all aspects of it. Same thing with the branding and marketing, a really bootstrap approach. And believing there was a better way, a better path forward than what, from my experience, the way I saw, career professionals and agencies treating clients in a mere transactional way. I felt that there was an opportunity to do greater, better work. And I'm still learning every day and making mistakes every day.
What do you see as common mistakes or challenges that your clients face, and how do you remediate to these?
I think one of the biggest mistakes a lot of businesses make is they're looking for the quick fix. They're looking for a quick solve, marketing tool or solution to fix all their problems, to generate this, the magic 10x growth, right? In a month or less, these kind of false promises. Not to say that a lot of these marketing tools and tactics don't work, but before you jump right into that, you need to be very, very clear and consistent with your identity and your message. Because if you are not able to articulate exactly who you serve, in what capacity, what the kind of value solution is that you bring to the table or transformation, it's going to be a lot of wasted time and money on a lot of these marketing tools and tactics that, yeah, they might seem like the right sort of remedy, but they're short-term, band-aids to longer-term problems. And that starts with how do we remedy that? Going back to the foundation of who you are, why you exist, and how you serve.
Why do you think people have such a hard time finding themselves or defining what their values are?
Because people are impatient. They want immediate gratification and results, and a lot of times are not willing to self-reflect or be honest or vulnerable with themselves to even ask that question. I think we live in this very, very fast-paced culture, society, world where, I don't have time to sit and think and contemplate a greater purpose. I need to start building and executing. So I think a lot of it is just giving yourself the space to think about it. I think it exists within everybody. And I think a lot of people kind of write it off as, it's a little bit kind of, airy-fairy, it's a little bit poetic, it's a little bit kind of ambiguous, and how's this really gonna kind of define who I am and what I do? but without a major purpose, you're kind of a ship at sea without a map. You need to have that and anchor that as kind of what is going to guide you in all aspects of your life. But it really doesn't take much aside from a little bit of time and a little bit of vulnerability to kind of ask the tough questions to yourself.
You often talk about mental health on your LinkedIn. Founders, sometimes we get overwhelmed. I think we don't take the time to stop and ask ourselves the real questions. What have you felt in your own entrepreneurial career? At times, has it been overwhelming to face all these challenges and try to solve one at a time? And what would you recommend for new founders out there in terms of mental health?
It's an awesome question as well. Look, I've wrestled with mental health for most of my life, and certainly in my career as an entrepreneur. Things like doubt and imposter syndrome and stress and overwhelm and burnout. And I think a lot of people do. Not everyone talks about it, but I believe a lot of people like us wrestle with this. The way I go about it, honestly, I spend a good portion of my time. I spend a lot of my time constantly learning and growing and consuming new information and ideas and guidance, both personally and professionally. I think you got to carve out time to do the personal development work in tandem with the professional development. There's always new tools, new platforms, new techniques to learn to better your skill set and to grow your business. But it can't be all that all the time. You got to really carve out and be mindful about what you can do to nurture yourself, your soul, and finding a balance. I'm sure you get this all the time. You've run multiple successful businesses. Where's the off switch, right? How do you know when to kind of turn off and disconnect intentionally? I think you got to really impose that upon yourself before you hit that point where, oh, it's too late. I am completely burnt out and I have no energy to continue.
Yeah, my switch off nowadays looks like my head hits the pillow and it's instant sleep. I've grinded quite hard before my wedding and I'm kind of slowly phasing this out. Nowadays, it's like probably 1% less intensity on a daily basis. And refocusing. You and I, we started the conversation talking about refocus. Well, a refocus in my case is a bit less podcast and a bit more sales calls, so I can generate a bit more income the time that I refine these back-end podcast funnels, which are really profitable too, but the direct sales is like, okay, 1.5K, 3, 4, 5 times a day via a podcast. It might close a bit later, Anyway, I've been doing some of that because yes, it's a bit too intense. 10 to 15 CEOs interview alongside with the sales calls. And yet, like, I tried this experiment because I thought there could be something behind it. There was something behind it, but I would advise folks to be aware of their hypothesis and their experiments and not to jump in mindlessly into something. I know what I'm doing. I know my body. I know my limits and probably reach those limits because I'm sick right now and have been early wedding, but it's important to have plans, execute on them, and at the end of the experiment conclude, okay, am I continuing with that or am I moving on to something else? You and I, we also spoke about the importance of experimentation and having a couple on your plates to see if you could have this major win while keeping on your straight path and your core product and investing most of your resources into that. So nowadays, in your case, what's your focus? Because there's 2 months remaining to this year. How are you splitting your days and what are your priorities?
You're asking me? It's a good question. I need to get on that. As you mentioned, this is something that you and I talked about at the top of it. it's really not even, it's the opposite of what I would typically do. Typically kind of the Q4, it's like, okay, how do I pack in as much as I possibly can before the end of the year? More clients, more work, more this, more learning, more, you know, I'm doing the opposite. Trying to do a little bit less and to focus in and to dial it down a little bit. Um, you know, be much more intentional with the type of work and projects that I take on and who I work with. And so, honestly, it's been a learning lesson for me. And this is, I think, something that's important for any business owner, or entrepreneur, learning to say no. And thinking of no as a complete sentence. All right.
Sounds like you had a tough client.
How'd you guess? I've had plenty of
Been
tough
there, done
clients.
that many times.
Yeah, I've had plenty of tough clients. I mean, it's crazy. It's kind of the Pareto principle, right? Where sometimes 20% of your clients create 80% of the headache. So it's about setting boundaries, and sticking to those boundaries, what you're willing to do and what you aren't willing to do. And I think most people will respect that if you articulate it clearly and often. But a lot of times we don't do a good job of communicating that at the forefront, and it's we're underway with an engagement and it's too late, and you understand, wow, this particular person or client is really demanding unfairly, an unreasonable amount of time or extra effort or extra energy. And it's, got to reframe the problem to them. How would you feel if I was taking advantage of this situation?
Yeah, last tough client I had, we have a no refund policy, and my team was doing the best in the setup part, which is really chaotic, and he totally lack of patience, and we already had invested great money, more than he invested in us, and he's like, yeah, give me my money back. It's like, no, this is not how it works. You signed this contract and so forth, and we ended up giving him the money back anyway, because usually these people, they're very toxic and they're really tough to please, and whatever you do, they'll try to win and have you lose. They're win losers, I call them.
Yeah.
My thesis on that, since I want scale, is expecting this, and on the emotional side is just more exposure. So I get accustomed on a heart level to these people, and I just give them their money back. It's just part of the game, right? And I just try to have more of them. And what happens with my heart, it's not that it solidifies in a piece of stone, but it just gets used to these folks every now and then entering my business. Unfortunately, I call them the 5%, what do you think about that exposure technique?
Yeah, look, I think what you described is very healthy. I think you need to have a sort of an emotional sort of resilience to it and detach yourself personally, emotionally from the work. Because we take it personally, right? It's a reflection of us and our business. But I think you got to have a healthy separation from it. What I've tried to do is really be very, very clear upfront with, here are, my values and what I expect and what I will do for you. And here's in turn what I expect from you, right? You need to kind of get clients to self-qualify themselves a little bit. And I think they'll respect you for it, in the process. Instead of just entering into a blind agreement and just hoping and praying for the best.
Yeah. But whatever you do, you'll always have, toxic people come in, even if you tell them up front and so forth. They're, pathological liars. They're really good at convincing you of their story and manipulating you into taking actions, not only on the client level side of things, but also on the employee side of things. I've had plenty in my businesses over the years, and that's why I think exposure, just okay, this is part of the game, and because yeah, the alternative sometimes is just like a limiting scale. But that's my personal opinion. I want to ask you branding questions for the next 6 minutes we have. Because my branding, I mean, part of my brand is like not caring, but it's just assuming what I am and what I am good at, what I'm not good at. But I'd love to look better online. Your website looks really good, for example. Everything looks really thoughtful and well placed, well designed. So I know that you're probably gonna answer that a good brand starts with being clear on your value. Yeah, we covered that. Then once I have these values, how do you go with designing a brand that really reflects these values with the colors, with the UX, and everything that I see on vanquishmediagroup.com?
Mhm. Yeah. Look, I think, people like to jump into when they think of branding, they think of logo and they think of colors and design. Um, Branding is so much more than that. But honestly, that stuff comes really towards the end of the brand development process. You know, begins with brand identity in terms, your brand core, your internal values, your purpose, your why, all that good stuff. Your brand positioning, how are you uniquely situated in the marketplace, your competitors, your customer, your audience avatars and personas, and then brand personality, right? Once we've known those two different things, who we are, how we're unique and different in the marketplace, now it's focused on how we want to show up in the world, in front of people. And the brand personality is everything around, the personality and tone and voice of the messaging that you're using, the copy. And then, of course, it's the visual aesthetic, right? What colors, what themes, what elements, what shapes are evoked or represent some of those core identity values. And it becomes a lot easier than looking at a blank page when you're starting to build a brand and say, all right, what's going to look cool? Okay, well, you can come up with something, but is that really going to be representative of the brand? And a lot of people start with the visual, the candy, before they eat their greens, which is, really the root of what should inspire the visual kind of flair and flavor of your film, of your brand. So that's, and the other thing is consistency. It really is, building out a brand identity guide and a brand style guide, both of which are like the Bibles of your brand. And so anything you do, podcast, social, email, website, need to be inspired and aligned with those kind of core guides.
Love it. You're also a fan of podcasting. What do you see in podcasts in terms of scale, in terms of reach, in terms of meeting new people? Why are you bullish on pods?
Why am I building strong pods, you said?
Why are you bullish on pods?
Why am I bullish on pods? Good. Yeah. Look, I think you're doing it really well, honestly. I think what you're doing in terms of, Podpire is a really brilliant model, for people to look at podcasting in a new way, right? As a way to drive new business and new networking and new relationships. I think that's really, really smart. One of my clients is actually a podcasting studio. It was inspired and started by a successful podcast that the founder started themselves and really loved it and began to kind of gain notoriety and be able to do it for others and started a podcast studio around it. I think they're wrestling with the same question around how do we get more businesses, and that's their goal, more B2B versus B2C, to lean in and invest in podcasting. And again, as we've said at the beginning of the call, I think it comes down to it's an amazing tool for storytelling. And storytelling is the most amazing and powerful tool for businesses to share their voice and their message, right? We are seeing diminishing returns on traditional advertising methods and approaches, that don't really build kind of the resonance and loyalty. Storytelling does that. And so podcasting is a great way for a brand to build an authentic voice, tell their stories, feature their clients and their stakeholders, really become humanizing in the minds of their customers. So that's kind of why I think podcasting is a fabulous tool, not just for, entertainment, but for driving business as well.
Love it. Thank you, Chase, for sharing these insights today. Where can people find out more about you?
You can find me on LinkedIn. Would be happy to have a chat. Send me a DM. And you can also check us out at vanquishmediagroup.com. We've got a bunch of free resources you can download if you want to get started on your brand blueprint or your messaging. Would love to hear from you.
And that was another CEO Wisdom Pod with Chase Friedman. You can find us at cowisdompodcast.com.